It is critical that the specific.
Hello and welcome to the Friday weekly voice chats. We are Men's Humans Rights. We are the semi-official Discord server of the men's rights subreddit. Today's topic, we're talking about how the UN mistreats men and boys. And if you think this title is a clickbait title, it is not. The UN absolutely practices sexist policies that has resulted and is currently resulting in the deaths of men and boys. I'm going to start off by showing you this link from the World Food Program. Please follow along the Friday text chat channel. It's what you're seeing on your screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. Some people think it is as much, if not more so, the main event than the actual voice chat. But I'm going to post this first link here, and you're going to see it's an article saying this is how women are more hungry than men and boys. Let's see if I can find, when you actually click it, it says, these are the 6 reasons that women are hungrier than men today. Hold on, let me get a print screen of that. And then I'm going to show you the consequences of these kinds of policies. Let me post that screenshot. Hang on. Basically, the UN claims that women are hungrier than men, and women and girls are hungrier than men. And so, therefore, they operate policies that exclude men and boys from food distribution. Hold on, let me get this up. There we go. Okay, so that's what you see when you click it. These are the top 6 reasons women are hungrier than men today. Let me show you the consequences of when you have these kinds of policies. 11 years ago, or 12 years ago, when Haiti was struck by the earthquake, the UN set up women-only food aid, where only women were given food. And the logic was, well, those women will go back and distribute it to their families. A, why would you only do that for women? And B, what if a single man lives alone? How is he supposed to eat? Logically, it's completely ridiculous to think that women are more hungry than men. In what village in the world do the fathers and sons and brothers and husbands eat? The wives, mothers, daughters, and sisters are left to starve. A boy and a girl living in the same household would be equally impoverished, right? It wouldn't be like the brother is like the girl, the daughter is poor, but the brother is somehow not poor. Like the 6-year-old girl sister is starving, but the 7-year-old son is not starving. It makes absolutely no sense at all. If a village is hit by a famine, why would the women be less hungry than the men? It's completely disingenuous. It makes no sense. And it has led to policies such as women only food aid in Haiti. There is a lot of stories like this, a lot of programs like this. The World Food Program has an ongoing, continuous program of only giving food to women and girls. And Muhammad, I believe you had a link about something going on in the Ukraine right now. Now is a good time to post that. And we are opening the floor. I know a lot of people have a lot of links, so let's get to it.
Thank you, Blue. The basically what's going on is that the UN has a very specific policy of only giving food to women and girls. And of course, they're ignoring boys and men. They say that boys and men can come along to help carry the food for those who are actually like intended to eat it, as it were. But they're not supposed to like queue up with them. If they queue up on their own, they don't get any food. And if they well, basically, they are now also saying, in the same breath almost, that if you know these food drives, when they do them, they have riots from the men because the men can't get any food, and they have men stealing food from quote unquote vulnerable people who need it. This is in the same articles where they all tell you that they only give the food to women and girls, and they've got a voucher program now, which is specifically and entirely for women and girls. So it's very much a case of a self-created problem where they are using men being angry that they're not getting any food to demonstrate that the men are violent and don't deserve any food, basically.
So they basically they starve men, and when men rob women or storm the food lines out of starving desperation, they use that as justification to say we're not going to give men food. That's crazy.
That's pretty much what they're doing. They're saying that women are the only people who can really be trusted with the food, and that if if you don't have a woman with you, you're not going to get any food. And I can show some articles if people can keep the chat going while I do that.
Yeah, please do. I'm just gonna say, like, wouldn't you, like, logically, isn't it very basic and obvious that if you gave food to both men and women, then you would solve the problem? I mean, it's so obviously done in bad faith. It's so illogical and so outrageous that it's being done intentionally. It's an evil thing being done. It's being done on purpose. It's being done with malicious intent. It's such a basic issue to avoid. Just give everybody food, right? Then you don't have the problems. I mean, it's obvious that if you only give food to women, you're going to create the problem of men being starving and men being desperate. You know? I mean, how is a single man who lives alone supposed to eat in that scenario? After, what do they expect people to do after 7, 8, 9, 10 days without food? They expect it to let themselves starve to death? No. So, and are the women told that they're supposed to distribute food to the men? They should be. They should be obligated to be told that if they're the only ones getting food. Imagine the reverse. Imagine if they were only giving men food. Feminists would think it's totally fair that those men would be instructed to distribute food out. So why would the reverse not be true?
Well, essentially, they have a strategy of only prioritizing women and girls. And this is something we've seen before with a lot of feminist organizations. They will talk a big game about equality, but when it comes right down to it, what they actually mean is special treatment for women and girls. And this isn't just a case of starvation either. This is very likely, from the implications of the article, that they're not handing any supplies out to men. For example, they hand out tents as well. They hand out water and things like that. So they're not giving these things to men. And then the men are getting angry and they're stealing it off the women and girls. And that is feeding back into this cycle where the UN, people on the ground see men doing this, and they become callous to like the plight of men. But as Blue says, a lot of men live on their own. Some men are like gay couples. Some men have no women in their family. My family only has one woman in it, and locally. In the wider country, we've got quite a few other women. But if there was a crisis locally, there's only one person in this entire family who'd be able to go in a UN food line and get food. And she would have to distribute it around the whole family. Now, she would do that, but it's not necessarily the case that every woman would do that for their family.
When you consider the fact that many displaced people, many refugees around the world are men or boys, then it becomes even more of a shocking fact that they only hand out food and supplies to women and girls. So what happens to the large displaced and refugee population that are men and boys? It's when they're only serving women and girls, it becomes even more shocking.
Yeah, I mean, Blue, could you read out that last screenshot for me, please?
Women are the bedrock of food security and yet the hardest hit by climate shocks and food insecurity, said WF's Assistant Director Valerie Glabani. A sustainable future is only possible when women and girls have what they need to adapt to the changing climate. Evidence is that South Africa is being hurt more than other regions by climate change and that women and girls are bearing the brunt. Its temperatures are rising twice the global average, triggering more frequent severe storms and longer droughts, deepening the already widespread hunger. Much of that hunger is in rural areas. Among subsistence farming families, many of them headed by women. Many, not all or even most. Women and children make up most of the climate refugees who have fled southern Angola's worst drought in 40 years, hoping neighboring Namibia has a better chance of survival. Well, hang on. Women make up most of the refugees. Maybe that means the men are already dead. Or the men are the ones staying behind. Men who can't flee and can't be refugees. That's not even really an
Well,
argument.
as we've seen with Ukraine, the men are typically forced to stay. And this is something we've seen throughout the world. This is something that Poland is helping Ukraine enforce its border against its own men. So the men of Ukraine are being sent back. And when I say men, I mean men and teenage boys. So if you're a teenage boy, you get sent back with the men to die. And we have had reports of streets lined with mass executed men and boys. Like you'd have piles of boys lined up with bags over their heads in Ukraine. And then they focus completely on the women as they're coming out of the country. They remove all mentions of the men. They just ignore the men totally. And this is their classic modus operandi. The men bear the brunt of it, and then the women get all of the sympathy. And you'll see this in the media. You won't hear anything about this massive campaign to stop boys and men from leaving Ukraine anywhere in the media. And you won't hear about the fact that the Russians are also using conscripts, and that you'll hear about the Ukrainian citizens standing up to, volunteering to fight back against the Russian forces. You'll hear about old women volunteering and stuff like that, and they focus a lot on the women who are volunteering. But what you won't hear anything about is the young men who are forced at gunpoint to go and die for Ukraine and for Russia. And this is something that we also feeds into the problems with the UN. So what the UN has a nasty habit of doing, and they did this in Blanca, is when they know a genocide is coming to wipe out a town, they will put all the girls and women on buses and they will take them away, and they'll leave all the men and boys to die. And then the terrorists will specifically come and they will specifically target men and boys. So even if there are women left there, the chances of them being killed are extremely low, versus the chances of you being killed if you're a man or a boy. And they were ripping like little children out of the arms of their parents and throwing them, on the ground. And it's like they will refuse you entry to UN-controlled territory if you're male. The reason they give is that they're worried that there will be terrorists in among the men they allow in, which is pretty typical gynocentric argument, in that they are willing to sacrifice the entire male population for the safety and comfort of the female population. So even if the entire male population is entirely innocent, they will just let them be wiped out. And this is the United Nations who've done this. We've got citations all over our citation list regarding this. And yeah, Blue, you want to say something?
I just wanted to make a quick point. Be wary of the phrase mostly women and children. Mostly women and children are the victims. You hear that a lot. But if you added up all the men and children, you see the trick. Then most of the victims would be men and children. So if you just add the women and children together, they're apt to outnumber the men, you see.
Isn't it true that the a whole entire world population is 51% female and 49% male? Isn't that true now? No.
Yes, it's true because men have higher mortality rates at all ages, including infancy. There are more boys who die at birth than girls, which gives credence to the notion that, which in my opinion, science is pretty clear and rock solid, male humans are biologically more susceptible to death from natural causes. When you control for all environmental and lifestyle factors, such as work, such as stress, such as diet, because none of those factors obviously apply to babies. Babies don't smoke.
Oh,
Babies don't have stressful jobs.
and I
Baby
think the
boys,
reason why I
baby
think they're
boys are
all
more likely to die.
yeah, and the reason why I think baby boys are more likely to go is because of male circumcision as well.
No, it's the effect of testosterone, and it's the effect of the Y chromosome, and it's the effect of boys are born with less stem cells, which are good for your immune system. I mean, circumcision may contribute to that, but even in
It
countries with
actually quite strongly contributes to that. We have evidence now that sudden infant death syndrome is strongly linked to circumcision, like very strongly linked.
But even in countries with very low or almost non-existent circumcision rates, you still see a gender gap with baby boys dying at higher rates. I'm not
You
saying
do,
circumcision
yeah.
isn't a part of it. Of course it is.
Well, that's why 104 boys are born for every 100 girls. It's obvious that nature intends to compensate for this natural attrition of males. And much of it, I believe, has to do with the XY chromosome. XX is redundant, and therefore, if there's a faulty gene on one chromosome, it's replaced by the other X chromosome. Uh, there's reason to believe that males are designed to be more susceptible to mutation. Because, well, frankly, males are there's an argument that the male is of lesser importance in the survival of a group survival. It has to do with reproductive efficiency. Back in prehistoric times, when the struggle was just to have enough offspring to offset the attrition so as to keep your numbers up, and the total number of birthing females in your population is not the sole, but it's far and away the largest single factor in determining how many offspring you can expect to have in your next generation. So also you see males are in a stronger position to spread around if the vast majority of genetic mutations will be negative, being just randomly created. But once in a great while, a mutation is better than the original, and it's better placed in males that can spread that genetic mutation around more than a female could. So it's complicated. There's all this biology that's going on, but that's part of why the attrition rate is higher for males.
And this doesn't at all excuse, because I'm sure this argument, when you said it's better to have more women than more men in terms of survival and spreading the genes, I mean, a 50-50 split is biologically the healthiest split you could have. But this...
And also what I'm talking about is prehistoric conditions. It has absolutely nothing to do with modern.
Right, I was going to say, is absolutely not a justification for a modern day refugee camp with modern day technology and billion-dollar funding turning down 50% of the adult population. So a lot of times that argument would apply if the species was dying. If we were down to 12 human beings left on the entire planet, then all of a sudden that argument applies. we're not even close to the point of underpopulation on planet Earth. So if anything, the population is growing too quickly. So it's irrelevant to today's world anyway.
Right, it's totally irrelevant, but it remains instinctual. I mean, you just have to look at the situation. It's instinctual, as you said yourself, Thomas. It's insane if you look at it logically, rationally, factually. So why do we so prioritize the health and safety of and well-being of women and girls? Well, there's this instinctual component.
Yeah, I think we should move back onto the UN. Mohammed wanted to give us an introduction to how boys are treated in schools where there is a strong UN influence.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. These aren't schools where the UN has a strong influence. These are schools owned by the UN. So basically, everything that goes in them is decided by the UN. With a lot of these schools, there's a lot of physical abuse and heavy verbal abuse towards male children. And in terms of physical abuse, it is basically exclusively male children. And in terms of verbal abuse, in terms of heavy verbal abuse, it is also male children. But physical abuse, it's basically like 99% males. And another problem is in these schools, they're more likely to try to help out female children than male children, especially with grades, etc. And in fact, female children do better in these schools. But the problem is, for example, my school, they try to force a lot of feminist type ideas into the books and stuff like that. They also had us, make a project about women being, discriminated against in the education system, even though they basically contribute the most of male discrimination in these schools that are owned by the UN.
Can you tell
And
us about the project you had to do?
wait, what did you say?
Could you tell us a bit about the project you had to do?
About like 2 years ago, they actually had us make an entire project about discrimination against women in the education system, which I just found hilarious because there's just a ridiculous amount of discrimination against males, way more than discrimination against females. Instead of, trying to, maybe address this issue, they just, make us do these projects and learn these lessons about female oppression.
I mean, could you tell us a bit more about what was in the project and the sort of talking points it had and things like that?
Well, the main talking points were that, not enough women are in technology.
Okay, are there any other things you can tell us about how your school is run? Because you gave me quite a list before we started the chat, and I was wondering if you could go through it.
Well, here's the thing. One of the more important things I want to address is that these schools are also giving more opportunities to female students. Even if a male student, let's say, a male student and a female student have the same capabilities and have the same exact potential, they still, let's say they're trying to give them a scholarship, they'll still choose the female over the male. Even if they both, have the same potential and skill, etc. They'll still choose the female over the male to take the opportunity.
Okay, Okay. Are there any other things you can tell us about how they run the schools? Is it because I've noticed a strong theme on their website where they'll talk about equality, but then they will put in place practices that strongly favour women and girls.
Well, a lot of the time they give these, I guess, sort of meetings where they, try to encourage men to be as supportive of women as possible.
Have they
Even
ever
though
done any like they did in, I think it was Canada, where they had all the boys stand up at the front of the class and apologise for being male? Actually, it might have been Australia.
I'm pretty sure that was Australia, but they haven't done anything like that here.
Well, that's a relief at least. Okay. Now, would anyone has anyone else got any other sort of information about the UN and their gendered practices that they'd like to share?
I remember years ago I had an article on hands showing how I think it was Mali was the country. Their program has achieved success in gender equality in education. This was the World Food Program when they give food to parents who send their kids to school. And they were celebrating the fact that now more girls than boys are in education. Well, hang on. That's not equality. That's still inequality. Surely success would be an equal number of girls than boys or in education. The logical implication of that is that there are boys who are now not receiving food for the program and thus not receiving an education. I wish I could. I'm pretty sure the country was Mali. If someone wants to try and dig that up.
A lot of noise on your mic, by the way. But yeah, we've seen quite a lot of programs that are very similar. For example, after the genocide in Rwanda, which mostly targeted men and boys, uh, I think it was the UN swept in to launch school programs where they were teaching boys to respect girls, but not the reverse. The BBC did an article on it ages ago. It's quite interesting to look at. I think it's on the citation list to look at the way in which they will talk about how the boys need to respect the girls, and then in the next paragraph they'll just talk about how the girls need to respect themselves and be empowered and stuff like that. So there's nothing about the fact that there were women taking part in this genocide. They were chopping up children with machetes and things like that. And there's nothing about mostly men being targeted and boys during this genocide. And yeah, it's pretty striking the kind of bias you get with these world-leading organizations who talk about gender equality but then mean gender supremacy when they actually get on the ground.
And another thing I've noticed, being in college right now, is that a lot of classes do exactly that. Even here, they focus a lot on girls, and one thing I've noticed especially is there's a lot of emphasis on consent for sex and safe sex and stuff like that, but it's all focused towards girls. Like they don't even mention anything toward the guys. And it's a very strange dynamic because if consent is that important, wouldn't it be important across the board?
It would very much be. I mean, this is how you can tell they're not actually interested in equality. They'll talk about equality, 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 and then they'll basically just use that as an excuse to focus on the needs of one gender over the other. And it always, just by coincidence, happens to be that they focus on the needs of women and girls over men and boys. Just amazingly by coincidence. It's never the other way around, even though patriarchy is supposed to be exactly that.
Well, and something I think is interesting is that a lot of people say men have more opportunities, men have, a lot more, avenues to pursue success than women do. But again, I'm seeing the exact opposite. Like every program in my college, for scholarships and different things like that, most of them are directed towards women. And there's a few programs that are directed just like generally, but there's nothing that helps men in specific. There's nothing that helps a lot of the boys who are having a hard time, paying for their college tuition or anything like that. But there's a lot of emphasis on like, if you're supporting children or anything, like as a woman, right? They don't focus on single fathers, but like if you're a single mother, they have like a whole club and a group and everything. And it's just a weird dynamic because it's entirely one-sided. And yet they complain and say that they have no opportunities and that no one's reaching out to them, right? We ran a program to bring people to engineering, basically, and it focused on women. And I'm like, I don't know why it's focusing on them specifically, but why not? And like 3 people showed up, and none of them even ended up going through with it. So it's not that they don't have the opportunity; they don't take the opportunities.
Going back to the UN real quick, and I think this also extends to universities. I think it extends everywhere. The problem of the empathy gap and the women are wonderful effect. As Tim was saying earlier, this is something that is instinctually ingrained, something that evolution has produced over millions of years. And this is what MRAs have to fight against. We have a double battle because not only do we have to, fight the problem of the issues, but we have to fight the problem that human beings are hardwired to not recognize male issues and to accept male suffering. And it's kind of it's a synergy because you now have the potentiation of the instinct, right? The women are wonderful effect, male disposability is now echoed by social conditioning of feminism. And there's like a synergistic effect between those two things. So not only are you born with the natural instinct of male disposability, but it is also conditioned into you from childhood that men are advantaged, men are privileged, and thus women need more protection. Even if we were starting from a completely neutral basis, a completely neutral grounds where men and women and girls and boys were exactly equal in every way, you see how this messaging would create a problem. But we're starting from a point where men and boys are now falling behind or have been behind for decades in some areas, in some parts of the world. So it's giving a head start. If you give an advantage, notice I'm not saying equal opportunity. If you give an extra advantage to girls' education in the West, you're giving an extra advantage to the group that it's not only already equal, but already ahead. Because it's not that boys aren't ahead of girls at school. It's that boys aren't even equal to girls at school. Boys are significantly behind. And it's not just a small difference, it's a big difference. 60% of college students in the US, undergrads, are female. For every 3 female students, there were only 2 male students.
Yes.
When that number was reversed, it was considered a gender issue.
It's similar to all these marathons in which women come and they cross the finish line first. And why? Because they're given a 25-minute head start. If you give enough advantage to women, they'll always win. Think of how it would help us if the instinctual impulse to prioritize the health, well-being, and safety of women and girls was commonly known and understood. I mean, that would be a huge help to us if this were if this were a society-wide understanding of this irrational, instinctual source of gynocentrism and misandry,
Can I give Can I give a personal example?
Please do.
Okay, so my mom and my dad, my mom growing up was the primary breadwinner, I guess, because she for there of course, there were times where my mom would make more money than my dad, but for a good while there was a good chunk of my life as a child where my mom made more money than my dad. And that shows that either like, and my mom only has like a high school diploma. Like, she went to college for a little bit, but she never graduated or whatever. And but my dad went to school for off and on for 13 years to get his accounting degree. And he has a degree in accounting, and yet my mom makes more money than my dad. So you can clearly see that with hard work and dedication, women can do anything that they want to. And, you can definitely see that, a little bit of gynocentrism in there.
Has anyone else uncovered anything they'd like to mention about the UN before we move on? Because I think this might be a good time to close the stream, if so. If not. Darkisha has something. Blue or Darkisha, would you like to read that out, please?
I'll read it out since I posted it. This is so the UN Women back in 2017 came out with their own study that they did on masculinities called Understanding Masculinities. Their study was mainly around the Middle East and Northern Africa. And this is just one of the beginning passages talking about just explaining the situation in certain countries. And this one's specifically about the Syrian conflict. So the Syrian conflict has been a major driver of migration in the MENA region to Europe and other parts of the world. Men, many of whom are from Syria, make up almost 2/3 of the refugees who have arrived in Europe since the start of 2015, and the majority are young and unmarried. Attention to Syrian refugee men has often focused on their supposed risks to Europe and the United States, or on the relatively small number who have joined ISIS or other armed groups. And while there has been considerable focus on the needs of refugee women, fewer studies have looked at refugee men's vulnerabilities. With migration from the MENA region to Europe, the United States, and elsewhere as well as ISIS-inspired or supported terrorist attacks in Europe and the United States, Muslim and mainly Muslim Arab men are seen in certain quarters as inherently violent or dangerous. Dramatic incidents of sexual violence from gang rapes in Tahrir Square during Egypt's 2011 revolution to the 2016 allegations of mass sexual assault in Cologne and other European cities have succeeded in othering Arab men, particularly single young men, as women-hating sexual predators. Many refugee-receiving countries have specific policies barring or raising obstacles to the entrance of unmarried men from the MENA region, and are more likely to admit families, women, and children, unaccompanied minors, and married men. So it's a bit Wow, were you going to say something? Sorry.
I was just going to say, so they know. They know about all of this, and we should not assume that this is somehow some innocent thing that they're just doing out of care and compassion for the most vulnerable, and they're just it's quite deliberate and systematic, and they know what they're doing, and they really don't care. I seem to recall ages ago, I think we've lost it, that there was even some sort of UN resolution on slavery in the 1940s, I think, that banned slavery but only for women. And then it took another 10, 20, 30 years before they banned, like, there was a specific exception for men in this, is what I'm saying. And then they slowly banned more and more of it over time. But the original resolution was quite happy for men to suffer forced labour. Apologies for
They
being
talk
a bit
about other
all over the
issues too.
place.
There's a certain point where they start giving graphs on like issues of like violence and suicide rate in like different countries as well. So they know all this stuff is going on. What kills me is the section after this is a whole section about how they try to explain how accepting equality, which to no surprise, they never define equality, what their definition of equality is. They say if men accept equality more, this stuff would go away. That's the next section after this one, which is an overview. This section's an overview of where I got the screenshot of the issues currently going on. And the section after it is how accepting equality would help that.
I have a question.
Oh, Mimi, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I have a question. So, on a personal level, I can understand the motives behind bias. Because it's very easy to fall into a us them mentality and say, oh, that's not our problem. But I don't understand an organization having that mentality because, as she just pointed out, they have all the information that they need to realize a problem, and their job is to solve said problems. And they don't really have a motive because they're not necessarily female or male. There's males and females in the organization, and I don't understand what their motive is. So I guess my question would be, do you have any theories as to why exactly there's a bias in the first place?
Yes, I do. Specifically, we're talking about the UN, and why does the UN go to such extremes? Because what they do goes beyond just male disposability. I mean, they seem to go out of their way to craft policies that exclude men, to the point of being not only irrational, but it's actually detrimental, because the problem of young men stealing food is not going to be improved by restricting men from food completely. It's only going to make it worse. So you have to, with that, assume then the most logical assumption is that the people behind it are malicious and disingenuous. And there is a theory called ponerology, which is a theory that psychopaths infiltrate organizations or politics. And when you really think about it, when you think about how politics works, when you think about people like Vladimir Putin, when you look at how corrupt the American government is, the UK government is, the UN is, it really kind of does make sense that psychopaths can recognize each other and they cooperate in a symbiotic way to increase their own power. They kind of cooperate back and forth to gain control and gain influence. And anyone who would say, oh, that's a crazy conspiracy theory, it happens all the time. I mean, pick up a history book, read about how Nazi Germany was built, read about the Cultural Revolution in China. I mean, look at American politics. Look at how many scandals, look at how corrupt the American government is. I mean, the same people who would say what I just said is a tinfoil conspiracy are the same people who talk about the military industrial complex and how we started Iraq and Afghanistan just for profit. So what is that if not psychopaths cooperating for profit? I mean, you're starting a war and you're killing thousands of people. Is it a stretch to call that kind of person evil or immoral? So that's what I think you're seeing. I think you're seeing a very classic example of narcissists and manipulators and disingenuous people using those personality traits to gain power. Because normal people, ordinary people, don't walk around thinking like that. Whereas those kinds of people think like that 24/7. In fact, they don't think like that. They just are like that. That's their instinct. And for whatever reason, feminism and the progressive sphere of politics has attracted these types. I don't know why they've latched on to feminism in particular. I guess because it's a convenient vehicle to use. But for whatever reason, this seems to be ongoing. So when you see obvious narcissists, obvious psychopaths like MRAS, aka Feminist Next Door, or Takedown MRAs, or Clementine Ford, or Bahar Mustafar, who tweeted "Kill white men," or Sarah Jong, who tweeted "Kill all white men," and then was hired by the New York Times as an editor, it's clearly obvious that something is going on here. And when you take it at face value, you almost have to sometimes blink and say, wait a minute, am I really seeing that? Is the UN actually denying men food? Did an editor from the New York Times actually tweet "Kill all white men"? Why does no one care? Why is no one saying anything? It really is very bizarre. But that's my theory as to what's happening.
May I say something?
Well, I have a theory about why they latched onto feminism, and I think that it's got a lot to do with the grievance nature of its academia. Well, I think that basically civil rights movements have a latent ability to be used by people to get power, because they rely on sympathy and victimhood. And if you can raise sympathy and victim, raise enough sympathy for a particular group to the point where everyone is embarrassed about the historical wrongs done against that group, and you can basically then use that as a stick to control people. So, like, how dare you criticize my what I'm saying, because I'm just doing this to help insert group here. So it's not just feminism that they've latched onto. If you actually dig into things like BLM, you'll find out that very quickly they're a scam. They've spent millions and millions and millions in donations on mansions. They have been caught laundering money. They're under investigation from the FBI. And that's just one example. If you look through a lot of charities, but you have to be very careful about what charities you go with, because quite a few of them are scams, and quite a few of them keep more of the money than they spend and stuff like that. So it's the problem that if you've got something which is open to grift, you will attract grifters. If you've got a system which gives people power and authority, you will attract psychopaths. It's a magnetic thing. This is why you'll find that all the worst people get into positions of power. It's because they are the kind of people who really, really, really want to get into these positions. And using the safety of women and children has always been the primary concern of every tribe. And as Tim's probably saying, if you suggest that with the women and children of your tribe are being threatened, or even another tribe, if you can raise sympathy for that tribe, are being threatened, you can raise support for you to go in and massacre all the men and subjugate that tribe. Putin did this with Ukraine. He said that the women and children of Ukraine were in peril and he was a hero for going and saving them. It's something you see over and over and over and over and over again. It is, you can see it going way, way back. If you look at the medieval period, you can find examples of it. If you look at ancient literature, you can find examples of it. It's the women and children are in danger. We must save them. We must protect the tribe by destroying this other tribe. Is the defining narrative of tribalism. So yeah. Um, anyway, back to you guys.
Yeah, to add on to what Mom and Blue were saying, I had some screenshots. Sorry, I'm probably playing the place of screenshots, but so these two screenshots come from the group of Women, Peace, and Security. So specifically, it's a group for women's peace and security, in the United Nations, and it says straight up, if you go to the UN obligations to this group. I highlighted in this one paragraph. UN Women supports the Commission on the Status of Women and other intergovernmental bodies in formulating policies, help member states implement these standards, and hold the UN system accountable for its own commitments on gender equality. They have complete power. These countries, these member states are obligated to gender equality. It's a pure power move. And on top of that, also the second one just admits that they clearly admit that this is feminist peace, quote unquote. But it's also something that not only gives them power, obviously, I think in a way is sadly, we all know the UN's extreme, but sort of useful in the fact that as long as their obligations are met, they can use their influence to help people, not citizens kind of people, not the average day person, to help the people running these member states, the people showing up to the UN to pass whatever they want to. And that's the kind of power they're holding. And that's their complete reason for passing this on. It's a mutual, extremely corrupt deal.
Yes, but again, I would urge to get back to the actual source rather than be mystified. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? It's perfectly clear why it's happening. It's in accord. It's in agreement with instinct. And therefore, it feels right. It feels like the right thing to do. Purely emotional. It just feels right to prioritize the health and safety of women. So we need to raise awareness of this reality in order to fight it. We need to say, look, it's instinctual. We need to fight that instinct. The instinct is irrational. The instinct derived from millions of years ago. It has no relevance in today's world.
So you think it's entirely the instinctual going along with the
I think the source is instinctual, and then enculturation takes place. Then, as Elizabeth Hobson said, it's why we have feminism. Feminism has taken our gynocentrism and weaponized it. You see, it's the culture then that takes it into such warped territory. The instinct was never meant to be so misandric. That's taking an instinctual impulse and then adding all kinds of layers of rhetoric onto it to weaponize it.
Yeah, and I think there's a
I
real motive to weaponize it. You know, Tim, you're right. This is all just, you know, a very straightforward appeal to things in most people around the world that kind of come with the outfit. You know, I mean, to support and protect and provide for women and children, you know, is very deep in human spirit. But weaponizing it is only, you know, it's not complicated. It's mostly just a matter of saying, you know, uh, we will modernize and you know, really put into overdrive, appealing to that instinct, while at the same time subverting, dismissing, subjugating the corresponding instinct, you know, that uh, traditionally and historically, has supported men, right? As long as that part goes away, and is not in the discussion and doesn't get any screen time, then it's not that hard to show pictures of of struggling women and hungry children, and say to everybody, hey, forget your problems, do this. But there's a reason to weaponize all this stuff, and the people that are actually doing it, and we're talking about places like the UN right now, like I said, this is all under the direct control of not a very large group of individuals. And they recognize the power of promoting gynocentrism and subverting androcentrism, or, subverting just masculinity in general, because it pays, and it contributes to the kind of instability that keeps them in power. And like I said, it's not that complicated when you just step back and look at it.
Yeah.
Because if it was all about feeding and protecting and providing for men, nobody would buy it.
That's right. It's just
It just wouldn't.
that would be contrary to instinct.
Yeah. They would just say, nah, no, that's all right. I'll take care of myself. The men wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't.
Right.
I don't.
Well,
I'm not interested in being coddled and promoted and supported over my over my fellows and over women, for example. But like I said, there's an instinct there that has to be overcome, and these people are running hard in the opposite direction, because that's where the money comes from. That's where the support, influence, and political power comes from.
Yeah.
I can understand that to a point. I guess I just don't understand, and maybe it's because I'm thinking about it logically, and this isn't a logical issue, but you wouldn't chop off your own legs, but they're essentially attacking their own infrastructure, because men, for the most part, hold up the infrastructure of a country. They do the hard labor jobs. They do all the stuff behind the scenes that holds up the infrastructure of a country. So they're, in essence, kind of chopping their own legs off. And I just don't understand the logic behind that.
Long term, you are absolutely right.
Logical.
Yeah.
It doesn't make logical sense. It makes emotional sense.
Yeah. But long term, you are absolutely right. It will reach an endpoint that will cause a collapse that will affect even them. But they're not really thinking it through that far. They do understand that right now, this is working great. Okay, as long as gynocentrism is something that the powerful are visibly supporting and visibly enacting, then everyone who is just indulging their instincts are applauding. They're saying, "Yay, go!" But when the bill comes due, yeah, you're absolutely right. There will be no one left to pay it, because we'll be gone. Right? It's it's one thing for men to stand up and be indignant and be angry and be frustrated, but it's something else entirely if we're just absent. If we're just disengaged. That's catastrophic. And too many of these kinds of people just believe too firmly in in their ability to rebuild something better after the catastrophe. And it's like something I tell people all the time. What if there's no very sudden and very abrupt catastrophe, right? What if things just keep getting a little bit worse all the time for a really long time? And all the people that were around when things weren't so bad are gone now, and there's no real memory of how things ought to be. right? People are adaptable. They learn how to accept the unacceptable, right? There's no catastrophe. Everything doesn't just crash and burn all at once. It's just a little bit suckier all the time, right? What will be the condition of men in that world? Because they're not going to care, right? And they're not going to be assertive and competitive, and think in objective and logical terms. They'll be mushy, that's like the little vision of hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's not going to be great, that's for sure. And I think if we get to a point
I
where
feel like this might be a good time for Doc to take us out. Thank you everyone for coming. We're going into free talk mode in a minute, just as soon as Doc has finished speaking.
Before I speak, I believe Cody said he wanted to speak before the stream ends real quick.
Thank you. I don't know if my audio is okay, but I just I wanted to talk to the people who are joining the men's rights movement. Of course, the people that are been here in this server, they are well aware that male circumcision is a big issue for the men's rights movement, and I just wanted to encourage anybody who's new to the movement to consider advocating for ending circumcision, because I believe this particular issue is it's has the chances of reversing the course for men's rights, for the men's rights movement, because like everybody says, we do have an empathy gap. And when it comes to male circumcision, we're talking about children and, things that are done to male children provoke more empathy than grown men. So I believe we have a good chance here. And if you're looking to help out the men's rights movement, I would suggest maybe a few minutes a day, if it's possible, to reach out to any of the men's rights groups who are focused on ending circumcision. Reach out. If you got a few minutes a day to help out, reach out to me or any other people in the server who are active in ending the horrific injustice of male circumcision. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Should I take it out now, Ma?
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were going to do that as soon as he stopped, but yeah, please do.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Men Human Rights server, the semi-official Discord of the Men Human Rights Reddit. We are here every Friday, 4 p.m. UK time, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. It was an amazing chat. We love having you all here. Please come back. If you ever have a topic recommendation, you can always text Men Are Human, Blue Orange, or myself. We'll be happy to try and make it possible and talk about it. And hope to see you all next week.